So welcome everyone. This is hard to believe it, but it's the final conversation in our Mobilize series for 2023, and it's called Pilot to Permanent, Retrofitting Our Streets. So as usual, we're going to get started by introducing our exciting presenter and move into their presentation, and then get into a discussion with our fellow panelists, followed by audience Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and we're going to try our best to get towards all of them at the end. So for the Mobilize series, we are exploring the ways and the means in which we get around our cities and communities in the Caribbean. So for us here in Jamaica, a supermajority of residents in the Kingston metro area do not actually own cars, nor use them as their primary mode of transportation. Despite this, the infrastructure that makes up our transportation network is specifically designed to advantage private car use over all other alternatives. So with a transportation system that is distinctly car dependent and lacks any sort of reasonable alternatives, getting around the city is a major source of frustration for us all. So whether you drive, whether you take the bus or walk, moving around our cities is any combination of expensive, unpredictable, time-consuming, and increasingly more dangerous. So for the Mobilize series, we are trying to explore how peer cities in the global south are transforming their transportation systems to be more efficient, safe, and equitable for all. So for those of you who have been with us for the past 3 conversations, really wanted to wrap up the series with some empowerment and ensure that we are putting the tools and ideas into the hands of citizens and residents who are passionate about their communities, but may not have the power, connections, or resources to manifest these changes. So in today's conversation, we're going to talk about and learn about tactical urbanism, which is an approach communities and in fact local governments can use to rapidly prototype changes to their streets and other infrastructure to really fit local needs. So using cheap and accessible materials, communities can install temporary interventions and play around with different designs. They can monitor, they can evaluate it, they can tweak it, and use that pilot period to sort of advocate to make that intervention more permanent. So for those of you who are new, my name is Doreen Duncan. I'm one of the founders of Island City Lab. We are a Kingston-based urban think tank dedicated to understanding the unique features and challenges of small islands in the Caribbean. And our aim is to improve the built environment by building and fostering and convening a network of civic thinkers to confront these challenges. And this forum is a part of that programming. So I'm going to ask Beatriz to come on. So today, our main speaker is Beatriz Rodriguez. She is a program manager at the Global Designing Cities Initiative, GDCI, supporting cities that are part of the Bloomberg Initiatives for Global Road Safety, BERG. Beatriz holds a bachelor's degree in architecture and urbanism from the Federal University of Kira, and a master's in transportation planning from the same university. Before joining GDCI, she worked as the urban design coordinator for cities in Northeast Brazil as part of BERG, and served as a transportation planner in the city of Fortaleza, Brazil. I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to hand over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Doreen. I'm going to share my screen. So I hope you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So as Doreen has already introduced me, I'm Beatriz Rodriguez. I'm from Fortaleza, Brazil. And I work at GDCI, which is a non-profit organization, and our main mission is to transform streets around the world to make cities more accessible, safer, and healthy for everyone. I'm going to jump in directly to the presentation. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And today I wanted to talk with you about streets, because streets actually are, just a minute, it's our largest network of continuous public space and one of our biggest assets in the cities. But unfortunately, this is how we've been planning our cities, and this is how we've been producing the streets that we have in all the cities around the world. And we sometimes forget that upside of urban mobility, we also have other priorities on the streets, like stroll, learn to ride, hop, play, balance, bounce, engage with the nature, celebrate, perform, dance, spend time with old friends, or meet new ones. So what is important for us to say is that streets are our largest asset for public spaces and contested space. And it's time for us who are planning the cities and who want to change our streets to solve a different problem from moving cars to moving people. Because we are killing people slowly when you talk about air pollution. More than 4 million people die prematurely from urban air pollution each year. And this is part because of the pollution from the vehicles. We are also killing people slowly because 38 million people die from chronic disease every year, and which the primary source of comes from lack of physical activity, so lack of walk and biking in the city. We are killing people really quick because 1.35 million people die every year from traffic fatalities. And I know this is a big problem in Jamaica as well. And traffic fatalities are actually the #1 killer worldwide for people between 5 to 29 years old. So at GDCI, we normally work transforming streets, supporting the cities to transform their streets into safer, healthier, and more accessible areas. We have this guide, that's the Global Street Design Guide, and it's free to download in a lot of languages. It's Spanish, English, French, and we work with different cities. That's why we have this idea of having the translations. But besides the Global Street Design Guide, we also have the Design Street for Kids Guide, and these new ones that were launched last year, the how to implement street transformations and how to evaluate street transformations. So the idea with all those guides and the work that we have with the city is from the global agenda to the local action, inspire leaders, inform practitioners, and empower the communities. In all our guides, the main lesson, the main message that we want to show is that we have to shift from this pyramid that was known from prioritizing cars to a pyramid that prioritizes people. So for all the projects, we have to put people first. So as we know, the cities that we work with, most of the cities are already built, and we have to work with structure, network, and sometimes we have to imagine what's possible from what we already have in the cities. We at GDCI work in different programs. The one that I'm going to present today, a little bit of the projects, is the biggest, the Bloomberg Initiative for Global Road Safety, but we also have the Street for Kids, a collaboration of with the Bloomberg Associates, and the newest program, it's BC, the one that we work with, we partner with Bloomberg Philanthropies to help cities improve their cycling infrastructure. We work with cities around the world, so it's really important for us to borrow, steal, and adapt, since we have been learning from the experiences from all those cities, and we don't want anyone to reinvent the wheel, but we want to inspire people and cities to transform their own realities. Today, I want to talk a little bit more about the experience that we have in Latin America. So many Latin American cities, they have been improving their streets through bold transformations. This is an example in Bogota, Colombia, where this roundabout was transformed. And after the transformation, there was a reduction of 52% of the conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. And also the people, after seeing this interim transformation, said that almost 80% of them wanted the project to be permanent. And this is what the city did years later. This also happened in Quito, Ecuador, where this critical intersection was transformed, as you can see, with a new bike lane, crosswalks, and a tighter turn radii, and these types of transformations have been happening in many of the cities that we work with, as in São Paulo, Brazil. But I really wanted to detail the experience from Fortaleza, Brazil, the city that I'm from. And the city of Fortaleza started some bold projects in 2013, and the vision of the city was to build a city focused on people. So the pilot projects, the interim projects, or the theoretical urbanism project, as you might call, they, with monitoring and communication, were essential for the paradigm shift in the city. As I was talking about traffic deaths, Fortaleza is also struggling with this problem. And since the city started focusing on saving lives, they got to reduce 8 times in a row the number of people that died in traffic crashes. So I wanted to share some of the examples, and starting with this one at Cidade 2000, that was the first interim experience in the city. And I think it's really important to highlight that all transformations, all projects, they are different. They have a different story behind it, but I think it really helps to learn a little bit more about this type of transformation, understanding the stories behind. So for this project specifically, the population was complaining about the conditions of the area for a long time. And finally, the city had the budget to do a requalification. But the thing is that the design proposal that was ready hadn't been discussed with the city, and needed a lot of changes in order to bring some road safety elements, and also considering the public space that we wanted to create. So the idea was to do this public hearing with the community to show them possibilities, 3 different possibilities. And what we've noticed is that they didn't understand that much the idea. So that's why we proposed, 15-day intervention to improve the road safety qualities in the area, but also increase the public spaces areas, along with a programming of activities. It's really important to this type of transformation. So this is the area of Cidade 2000 before. As you can see, a sea of asphalt with a lot of cars, without sidewalks. And this was the proposal after the transformations. So more than 1,000 square meters were reclaimed into public space. And we had this shift in the space allocation from 21% of the space before dedicated for pedestrians to 73% for the space after dedicated to pedestrians. This is really good to hear also about the stories behind the implementation. Once we started to implement the transformation, the kids already started playing, and it was amazing to see how the area shift in a really fast. This is what Doreen was saying, that this type of transformation, they are really cheap, fast, and have a high impact. That's why it's so good to have this tool as a possibility for the cities. One of the metrics that we normally collect is the number of kids walking in the area, and we had an increase of almost 60% of kids walking on this area, and this since started to be really common. These pilot projects in Fortaleza started to be implemented in 2013 and led to bolder projects in the city to transform the city. So the bike lanes that used to look like this without protection, just painting on the asphalt, it started to look like this with protection, planters, and this is really key to invite more people from all ages and abilities to bike in the city. A vast sea of asphalt, like this one in Dragão do Mar, became a color for new public space. And this project specific was the biggest one that the city implemented, with more than 4,000 square meters reclaimed into pedestrian area. And with this transformation, it was important to reduce the crossing distance. The reduction of the crossing distance is one of the key elements for us to increase road safety in an area. Because for each meter you reduce from the crossing, you can improve and you can potentially reduce in 60% the number of crashes with pedestrians. And as I showed in Cidade 2000, we also had this shift in the space allocation for Dragão do Mar, from 24% for the space before dedicated for pedestrians to 66% after. And with this increase on the sidewalks, the extension of the sidewalks and the new public spaces, we also got a 91% reduction of pedestrians walking in the roadbed. And one of the most important metrics, as we know that speed kills, the reduction of 50% reduction on average speeds. So because of this transformation, 30% more people started to spend more time in the public space, and kids now have more room to play, and adults too. The city, they transformed, continued, and other projects and programs emerged from these first ones, like this one at this downtown, a commercial street that prioritized cars before, now put pedestrians first. And what is really important to highlight here is from previous research that we did in the area, we've noticed that 75% of all street users were pedestrians. But what we are seeing in the space, the allocation of the space wasn't exactly following this. 75% was dedicated for vehicles before the transformation. So what we did was to transform this area, making more equitable for pedestrians and all vulnerable users. And with the sidewalk extension, we had a reduction from 92% of people walking outside the designated and safe facilities. Also, it was really important to improve the crossing conditions, like this one, where we implemented this raised crossing and gave safe crossing for almost 1,000 people per hour. And as I said, the metrics where we consider kids, it's really important. And in this case, we had 3 times more children and youth walking in the area. This transformation also happened where people most needed, as this area in the periphery of the city, there weren't any public spaces where kids could play, and now they have this new plaza. A new meeting point was established for the neighbors, and also a place where kids can finally play. This experience with all these interim transformations in Fortaleza gave the city the confidence to go for capital projects too. So remember this area at Cidade 2000, after the transformation, this person, that's Isabel, she's one of the business owners, and she started a petition to make it permanent. And the area that looks like this before the transformation now look like this in the capital transformation. And one area that didn't have a crossing, safe crossing, now have a raised crossing for everyone. This also happened in all other areas in the city, like this one, that even have to go through the interim transformation before they went directly to the capital one. And it's an area next to a school. So this is a school street, and it's now a shared street where everyone can share the space, and it's safer for everyone. This is another example from Fortaleza as well, where this avenue, where there was 2 lanes from each side of the median, was transformed into a big sidewalk and a bike lane with just 2 lanes, just two traffic lanes. What started in Fortaleza with these bold and innovative ideas was important as well to inspire other cities in the region. So this is an example from Salvador, another city in the same region as Fortaleza, where we could transform this area and increase the space for pedestrians. This is another example from Recife, another city in the region, in a peripheral community as well, where people got now this big plaza that they take care of it themselves, and they are really proud of having this new space for kids to play, for people to use, because there are some bars. So it's a really good area, and they are now having this space for them to use as a community. And there's another project also in Recife, where in a busy corridor in downtown, we had the opportunity to support them to expand the sidewalk. And as I said, the kids are always a good metric to show if the place is safe than before. So in this case, no more children are walking or being carried in the roadbed. And one thing that's really important when we talk about business owners and areas where there are a lot of businesses is that there's always that fear if these kind of transformations is being implemented, that people are not going to sell anymore, their business are not going to thrive. So these thing that the secretary was saying is really important, because part of this street was transformed and the other not. And the business owners from the other part of the street were demanding that a similar intervention could be done in front of their shops. I just wanted to show this video before going to lessons learned and tips on how to implement those projects in your own cities. But this is from the first project that I showed at Cidade 2000. I was talking with this kid and telling him that after the transformation, that he was going to be able to run the whole thing. And he was kind of impressed. And this is the kind of reaction that we want from the community and from the kids. And we want to make them happy, and we want to show them that this is possible. So this is the example of Latin American shows us that it's possible to catalyze those momentos and make changes needed. And a few tips that I wanted to share with you from what we've learned along the way. So find local champions. It's really important to find people that are going to be your partners along the way, that are going to defend the project. And it's not about us consultants, planners doing this, but it's more important to have people from the community on board and really helping and engaging on the projects. 2, expect pushback, garner genuine input, but don't get paralyzed to the point of inaction. It's really important to strengthen that partnership with the community and to give them the space for them to speak and to criticize the project. But one thing that's really good for interim project is that it's also an opportunity to hear from them. It's also an opportunity to engage them and to say, hey, we are going to do this for 1 month, 2 months, and we can use this time to evaluate and see if this is the better option for your community. So it's really important to give them this space to talk and to make them feel heard, and also that their ideas are going to be considered for the project. 3, don't forget the details, colors, seating, all the play areas that can be transformed, trees, shades, spaces with painting, and thinking about all the activities that already happen in the area and can be optimized to be more and to potentialize all the things that can happen in the area. 4, programming and maintenance. These types of transformation is like something new to the area. Normally are vehicle areas, parking spaces that they don't have many activities before. So I think it's really important for us to considering what are the transformations and activities that can happen for people to understand the potential of that space. 5, involve the media and the press since the beginning, talking to them about the project, briefing them beforehand, explaining all the gains that you're going to have with the project, and changing the conversation in the local media instead of saying that we are going to take off traffic lanes, we are going to transform the space, save lives, consider all users, and making this space more lively for everyone. 6, don't try and reinvent the wheel. As I said, there are a lot of cities that are doing this, so it's important for us to borrow, adapt all the transformation that are being done. 7, measure what matters the most. There are a lot of good things that can be measured in each one of those projects, but sometimes we don't have all the resources that we need. So if we have all these types of metrics that we can measure, we could select and prioritize some of them that are going to show the most the success of the project. 8, lean on each other and on the global networks and spaces like this, where we can talk about those type of transformations, and where we can answer the questions, specific questions about the implementation or strategic questions about the process. 9, plan for scaling, not just a one-off. So this is part of one of our guides, the how to implement transformation. It's a process for the interim transformation, but also it's important to update the policies and understand that these transformations, they could be transformed to citywide programs. And 10, celebrate the success and communicate the success. So this is just an example, as I showed during the presentation, some before and after photos that can show the project. Some metrics that can explain the numbers of vehicles that are not speeding anymore, the numbers of kids that are not walking on the roadbed. And just to finish, just saying that the cities need your bold visions, your technical knowledge, your audacity, and your local action to get us there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Beatriz. Let me just add spotlight. There we go. The reason why I was so excited to have you kind of share your work and all of these examples is because of how intentional all of these interventions are, right? So in all of the examples you presented, local government or whoever was leading the project set a goal, a very measurable goal, right? To reduce fatalities, to increase the number of children in a space, to increase the number of pedestrians activating a space. And you measured and took metrics across the, the entire length of time. And I just want to compare that process in comparison to kind of how large scale infrastructure gets done across the Caribbean, right? So in a context where we're having lots of road widenings and highways being put all across the city, that sort of metric and evaluation and understanding, is that actually reducing traffic? What is happening to pedestrians and vulnerable road users on those spaces? That sort of metric and evaluation is not happening. And I think it's really inspiring. And thank you again for presenting. And before I continue ranting and going off topic, I want to bring on the panelists and introduce them. So first we have Doris Gross. She works as an architect and urban planner and is a lover of natural and built environments. Her passion for bringing together architecture and places and people and community and art and culture makes her committed to part of Kingston Creative's leadership. With her experience in urban planning, she oversees the creation of Downtown Kingston Art District, which includes public art projects, new and renovated art spaces, heritage projects, urban art, parks, and green spaces. We also have LaJoy, I'm going to ask Jordan to spotlight as well, is an experienced educator, researcher with a Bachelor's of Education in Geography and Sciences with honors, and a Master's of Science in the Built Environment program. She's currently the Senior Urban Policy Analyst at the Urban Renewal and Development branch of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. And for context, the Urban Renewal Department, their aim is to progressively improve the quality of life of residents and users of urban spaces through the resuscitation of the physical, economic, social, environmental, and cultural elements of these spaces, making them attractive, livable, and sustainable. So thank you, ladies, for all joining and jumping on the conversation. Also, people feel free to start putting comments and questions there. But I'm going to hand it over to you first, Doris, and then LaJoy. I think it's really important to kind of ground the conversation to understand what are some of maybe the top 3 sort of priorities that Kingston Creative has regarding the built environment. Doris, you're still muted. There we go.
Okay, thanks very much for putting this together, Doreen and Jordan, and for being such a loud and important noise in Jamaica for something that we're many steps behind Brazil, as we all realize, and we're dreaming of a lot of things that we saw in your presentation earlier, Beatriz. So thank you for inspiring, and I've taken your words, I wrote them down. We will borrow, steal, and adapt, if we may. So top priorities for Kingston Creative. I want to start with something that's not so tangible and practical, a little more from within, which is one of our priorities would be a wish that we all learn to respect and honor our our built environment as places where this current population and country has arrived from, and not to ignore that past, but to acknowledge it as the stories that were lived back then and to guide us forward. So it starts with something from within. And this storytelling becomes our cultural identity, which is used in the arts a lot. So somehow it is, if people who truly connect, they can also become believers of a cause or a change and be a part of implementing it. I don't really think that in Jamaica we have enough people that are these true believers who do anything it takes almost to get to a point of something they believe in. And in this aspect here, we're talking about urban renewal as a big area. Second priority I would describe as us wanting to achieve the use of our built environment again in a different way, not only for cars now, but for people. So whether that be old places, new spaces, modern, neglected, beautify, any spaces that are accessible to us, how can we activate them, reactivate them? How can we improve their uses? So what it means is we are focusing particularly on downtown Kingston, of which an image is behind me, which shows that we have a lot of potential. We've forgotten about it. So what could we do today without lamenting about it? What could we do today to move forward so we can use spaces, buildings, streets, courtyards, intersections, and turn them into walkable streets, pocket parks, small green areas, even in the densest of environments, which you see here. There is not much space to actually build a green space. And we all know in Kingston, we have too few of them, but even small green pocket parks would go a far way. Public art into an urban environment goes a far way. Around every statue, every mural, you have people now gathering. How can you make these new places? Pop-up events, entertainment, and maybe a way to structure our environment that it becomes flexible, where in the day it's something, in the night it's something else, on the weekend it's something else, in the week it's something else. And there is this one notion that somebody said, and I read that and it stuck with me. There is this sort of recognition that in our the inside space of our buildings should really be equally important to the spaces in between buildings. And we never think of it that way. There's so much space we should have in between buildings that would make our living in an urban context much more enjoyable. The third priority I would say is now how to navigate these spaces, streets, plazas, intersections, and that's important for local and foreign tourists and for the residents who live there. So Kingston Creative has developed a digital app, something you download on your phone. So you can now find a map of the city, important places on that map that you can visit and how to get there. You find where you can park, you find events and where they are and when they're held. We also developed a physical map. Some of us still love to walk with a physical map through the streets. And there's signage. So with all of those things in place, we're looking to see now that persons who have not been in the city for a while can find their way and explore. They can actually, it brings people together from different backgrounds. And then it offers opportunities for the residents of the city that have always been there for providing services, food, restaurants, retail, transportation. So overall, our effort really wants to make sure that gentrification does not displace the people that were there originally, but that it somehow creates inclusive communities, and then there's greater economic growth and personal development opportunities for those who live in those cities.
Thank you so much for that, Doris. And I just want to be clear. So there are, I know people on the call from different places, and some of these words mean different things. And I just want to be clear that when we're talking about renewal, especially here in Jamaica, I think what Doris would agree is that we're talking about retrofitting and reusing and kind of reinvigorating spaces and places, right? Not what kind of happened in the US in the 60s and the 50s, which is, kind of widespread leveling of places and just bringing in brand new things. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about retrofit, we're talking about reuse, we're talking about including and sort of platforming people and communities that are in those spaces. So I want to kind of hand over to LaJoy from the ministry's perspective, from particularly your department, the urban renewal team. What are your top priorities? And are they similar to Doris? Are there connections to be had?
Hi, Doreen. Are you hearing me clearly?
Very good.
Thank you so much. Let me just say thank you first for having me here. Thank you, Beatrice, for your presentation. Thank you, Doris, for everything that you just said, because I can relate. I know my branch can relate entirely to your mission, entirely to your visions, and we have very similar priorities. So the Urban Renewal and Development branch is a relatively new branch within the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. We were actually just reorganized under the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation last year. So we're babies, but we have visions, right? So we aim to achieve a safe, vibrant, inclusive, modern urban space. So we really have two priorities, but I'm going to break the second priority into two again. So our first one, and I don't know if I'm biased here in my position as the policy analyst, the first priority would be the development of our National Urban Renewal Policy and Action Plan. And our policy is really to emphasize the vision of the government of Jamaica, emphasize our priorities, our intentions to redevelop, redesign, modernize urban spaces, especially since there is so much blight that is occurring now. We got cabinet approval to develop our policy last year this time, and since then we have developed our concept paper, we have our policy steering committee, we've been meeting, and we have a good draft that we're continuously working to improve, and I have to say that we're not just focused on the built environment or the physical aspects of the built environment, but also focus on the soft objects. So we want to improve social life, want to improve livability. So that would be our main priority. Maybe I'm biased. So our second priority would be our Urban Renewal and Development Program. The UR12, we like to call it, because it's comprised of 12 mini programs. It's massive. So we have market redevelopments included, parks and green spaces, but I'm just going to pick two from the UR12 that we're pushing right now. And the first one would be to increase the number of green spaces in our urban spaces in particular. And that's not just Kingston. We consider all parish capitals as urban spaces. So we want to increase the number of green spaces island-wide. Just last year, we presented a paper on sustainable urban greening, because what we have observed is that we have a concerning green-gray ratio in urban spaces, and we acknowledge the benefit of vegetation and greening, so we're trying to provide more parks and pocket parks. So the third priority under the program would also be creative placemaking, and I was just telling Doris earlier that I'm excited to work with her, because we acknowledge the importance of creative placemaking. And we want to see how best we can utilize or leverage those benefits for urban renewal. So I'm currently working on a research paper on creative placemaking, or a place for placemaking, really. So excited stuff. Those are our major priorities.
Perfect. And I think we have a good combination, right? So Doris coming from the kind of civic society group that are believing that they can go ahead and start doing these things, building community power and doing these actions. And LaJoy is that government section, right? And policy is important for sure. I'm a policy person as well. So I think both of these things can work hand in hand, kind of achieve some of the visions, right? But I want to get back to the topic of tactical urbanism. So those nitty-gritty strategies that Beatrice kind of described. And I'm curious from both Doris, your perspective, and LaJoy, what do you see as, I guess, some of the potential benefits of using that sort of tactical urbanism approach to achieve some of your organization's missions and the vision that you guys have for spaces and places in Kingston?
Well, if I may start, I suppose Kingston Creative is doing exactly that, just taking charge of something that we are legally allowed to do. We couldn't be painting streets over without asking the municipality, so we haven't done that yet. But we have reached a limit. Obviously, we reached a wall, we reached a fence with the small things we can do, and we would really look forward now to connecting better with the government agencies, especially yours, LaJoy, which is a new department. So I appreciate this is all now coming on board right on time, to help us to get to this other level. And what we would like to see moving forward is the true sense of connecting to community. And what does that mean? It's literally everybody, and everybody has different needs in community. They are the property owners who are wealthy business people, usually own buildings, but they have their needs too. So how can we ask them to restore a historic building without making concessions and without understanding their needs and possibilities down to the lower levels? Kingston has a serious problem with street people, but moving people from the street, that does not solve the problem. So that's where your social look at things probably comes from. So the issues are really broad and they're really huge. So we look forward to getting more help as an organization with people who like to see these changes and to see how we can get that to the next level.
Okay. And LaJoy, what do you see as some of the potential for tactical urbanism in your very small department that has grand visions? In my mind, it feels like they should work hand in hand, but you tell me.
I agree with you. There are many benefits. I know that there can be some level of apprehension between authority figures and some citizens, and I believe that tactical urbanism can provide a sort of a bridge because it's so people-centered, and it really cannot be done without the buy-in of the community. So that level of involvement will help them to have a greater sense of place, appreciate the built environment more, hopefully help to maintain the space, and they'll be less resistant to the changes if it really is coming from them. Another thing I'd like to add is very cost effective. So there's less financial risk involved and just a huge capacity for benefits upon benefits. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's like one of the major selling points, right? You mentioned you're a small department, recently just kind of reformed just last year. I imagine having a big budget is not really feasible right now, but the idea of doing some of these sort of temporary interventions and saying, let's see how it works for X amount of weeks, measuring that, and then asking for money later on becomes more feasible, right? And I kind of wanted to go back to Doris and kind of bring in Beatriz here in on the question around metrics, right? So you talked about lots of the work that Kingston Creative does. What are some of the metrics that you either are collecting now or looking to collect in the future that kind of ensures that you are actually meeting the needs of all of those different community folks that you just mentioned, Doris?
So I think we're in the baby steps of taking metrics. So when I saw what Beatriz presented, that is very impressive, and that can guide those who finance this whole effort and those who write policies like LaJoy and other government agencies who would be a part of being either for it or against it. So actually I have nothing much to report in terms of urban renewal and numbers. What we have of course seen is with pop-up events, with temporary uses of spaces that were neglected previously, we can get hundreds of people into one space on a Sunday afternoon that didn't have two people previously on there on a Sunday afternoon. So there's some clear metrics there without even counting too much. But that would be important for us to also at another level really identify when the street behind me, which is a thoroughfare of trucks and noise and traffic, can find a solution to now respect and honor the buildings that are actually there that you can't even see. That's what I'd like to see, what we can do by removing cars. Then of course we want to drive somewhere where they're going to be removed. But bringing people more into the space. So I look forward to what Beatriz has to say to this, because she did a lot of work in that department.
Yeah, I think regarding metrics, we have a whole like booklet on this, that's how to evaluate transformations, which I totally encourage you to see it. It's available in Portuguese, Spanish, English. And it's really important, as I said, to prioritize. And we are talking about budget and how it's not possible to have all the resources it's normally a small department or even the community. So it's really important to prioritize and to start with the goal. What's the most important goal for this transformation? How can we show that it was a successful transformation? And the metrics are not always collected just to show the success, but also to inform the project, to communicate with the media. They are not usual, like they're not common metrics to collect, because sometimes there are a lot of cities that just collect vehicles vehicles quantity. So if we start at least counting pedestrians and counting people using the space, speeds are really important as well, because when we have a really close relationship between speeds and saving lives. So if you say that you reduce 50% the number of cars exceeding the 30 kilometers per hour speed, it's really important to show that this has a really important potential in saving lives. And as I said, metrics go beyond the numbers. I think it's important to highlight the power of the images to sell the project, to convince people that are not that convinced as well. Even inside the city hall or the community, if they see, they can really believe that this change is possible.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, as you said, like the metrics also are part of telling the story, right? And I think to your point, oftentimes when we talk about, road expansions or road projects, the only metric that is measured are cars, right? But pedestrians are, in fact, a lot more pedestrians on lots of these spaces than cars, right? And I think it begins to broaden the story of the impact, right? And I think there's also something to be said about co-benefit. That one initiative that, Kingston Creative might be interested in, activating a space, activating the space in between buildings, that could also help with, road safety for pedestrians, activating spaces and bringing children after school. There's lots of different things, right? So I think metrics and thinking about the co-benefit. So I know that we have a bunch of questions in the chat and I want to start going through them. So I'm skipping ahead, and I know that, so there's a question here from Norman Garrick about agreeing with your point, LaJoy, that we need lots of pocket parks, but a bigger need is kind of green streets to provide cool shades for walkers, for pedestrians. It was always needed, but now in the era of climate change, it is almost life and death, right? So I'm going to send that comment over to you, LaJoy, but after that, I'm curious, Beatriz, have there been any sort of tactical urbanisms around greening, around trees, and including vegetation in a place? So, LaJoy?
Right, so the branch acknowledges, and we love trees, and one of our 12 mini projects is actually green corridors, so we're right there with you. We are seeking to implement that soon. I recently had the opportunity to travel to China and see how they do. Well, it was the main aim of the trip, but I was amazed with the green corridors and how they were able to line the streets with plants, and it was everywhere. So I'm bringing back that knowledge now, integrating it into the policy, seeing how best we can implement. So we are doing a lot of pocket parks. Even now as we speak, we have done some before. We have 3 major parks working on as well, one in St. Elizabeth, St. Thomas, Portland, but the green corridors is next for us. So we're getting there. Give us a little time.
Okay.
Yeah, just adding to your question, it's really hard to provide greenery and shade in an interim transformation, but there are options. Like in some of the photos that I've showed, there are some shade infrastructure that are not actually trees, but yet that you can implement in a way before the permanent project. But also there were some examples here in Fortaleza where the trees were planted directly on the asphalt. So you can plant bigger trees to have the shades. If you are going with interim transformation that's going to last a year, for example, so you can plant the trees in the asphalt, and once the transformation is transformed into permanent, you just can use the same ones that you have implemented before. But normally for interim transformation, we go with more like shade infrastructure, like tissues and different kinds of covers that you can use instead of the trees. But we definitely, I agree that greenery is key to transform, like to make these new spaces usable, that people are going to be they are going to invite people more because of the shade infrastructures. Because I know I probably is a problem in Jamaica as well, but in Brazil is a thing that from like 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., it's impossible to be outside without a shade infrastructure. So if we don't think on all, and that's one of the lessons was think on all the details, and greenery is a big part of it.
Perfect. So there's a question, a very tactical question. I think it's for you, Beatriz. What was done with light poles? In Jamaica, they often kind of take over the sidewalks and they're right in the middle of sidewalks. What do we do about that?
Yeah, they are really difficult to move. So normally what we do is understand that they are an existence, that we are going to work with it. In some projects, we consider the place where the light poles are as the furniture zone. So we try to put everything, fit everything there. So in one of the projects that I've shown, the street vendors market, the part that we have the tents from the street vendors, we decided to use the line where the poles were before, since we couldn't move them, as the furniture zone. So everything that we wanted to put in the area, benches, for the street vendors, tents, and all the things that we wanted to, the planters as well, we use this as a furniture zone. Of course, it's easier if we can move it, but we know that's really expensive to do it. So we have to, it depends on each project, but normally we define this as an existence and that we have to work with it.
Yeah. I kind of tagging along to what you just said. We have a question or comment in here from Val Carnegie. In Jamaica, and I'm sure in Fortaleza as well, street vending in public spaces is a big issue. Also an opportunity, I think, too. Were efforts made in Fortaleza and other Brazilian cities to organize vendors and other informal sector businesses in such a way that they, I guess, kind of were, a part of the process of designing it, but also that they didn't take over the newly created spaces? And kind of, can you talk about how you decided to kind of split and share spaces between, mobile vendors?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's more an opportunity than an issue because they are part of this urban environment and this livable space that we are working with. So sometimes they are the key ingredient to have a place where people want to come. So normally we see the street vendors as something as part of the urban environment that they just need to be reallocated, organized in order to function better. And in some of the projects, one of the ones that I showed in downtown, we decided partnering with the downtown secretary to build tents, like physical tents that they were fixed in the floor where the street vendors could use. So this way they couldn't occupy the whole thing, and this worked, but it's not always possible to do this. So sometimes involving them in the beginning of the process and showing them why we're doing this and how important it is to maintain the space for pedestrians, using the paint as well to delimitate the space that they can use, it's really helpful as well, because sometimes it's just a matter of they saying, I don't know until where I can put my tables, until where I can put my tent. So this is important to have this kind of conversation with them. And it has been working. Of course, it's always easier when you just build the tent or you have this build space, but in turn transformations, you can also talk with them saying that it's important to have both transformation. And they are normally understandable because they know that people that are walking, they are good for their businesses.
Yeah. And I just want to say though, I feel like there's a lot we can learn from our mobile vendors, right? I think, us having this conversation about shade structure, there are places on downtown that have informally created entire shade structures over entire blocks, right? So I think there's a lot to learn. And as you said, including them in the process, ensuring that, getting a space that's designed well for the interim is also an economic benefit for them as well, right? There's a question in here for you, LaJoy, around kind of organizationally, what is the relationship between your urban renewal department and kind of working with KSMAC? And that is kind of the local government agency here for our city, Beatriz. So kind of how do you as a national agency work with KSMAC, which has, I guess, more of a role in all the things that are happening in the city?
Okay, thank you for your question. I think it has to do with, or it's based on what is needed, because right now we're implementing projects. Like there were funds allocated to MPs, and in the past there have been funds allocated to the municipal corporation. So we would collaborate in terms of guiding the municipalities into what can be done with the money in terms of our vision for urban renewal. And also we are always open to consultation. So anyone at all, if you have a proposal, if you have a concern, you can always communicate with us, and we're open to collaboration. So, and let me also add, in the policy, the draft policy, we're working on it. When we get to the action plan section, there will be different responsible entities for implementing various strategies. So collaboration, we can't avoid it. It definitely is in the pipeline, and we have been doing it to different degrees based on the need as it arises.
Okay. And Doris, I'd be curious from your perspective, when Kingston Creative is doing these projects, and for context, for those who don't know Kingston Creative's work, those aren't temporary interventions, right? You're pedestrianizing, you're putting in actual new pavements in place. So these are permanent interventions. But what, briefly, what's been the kind of process or the experience working with local government to get some of these initiatives off the ground and running?
Yeah. So truthfully, the permanent implementations were really done by the city. We wouldn't be able to dig up the street and repave it. So it has been done in collaboration with the mayor of Kingston and the KSAMC, and that's quite successful. And they're working with us to do this sort of step-by-step pedestrianizing of a narrow old lane that used to be a minor street to the major streets, used to be used for cars and shortcuts, and it was certainly dark and dingy and was not the place to go. So we're really happy that we have identified sort of a first route. I would call it a pilot project, a beginning of something that we can study and see where it works and where it doesn't work, and then expand on it. Kingston Creative's interventions have more or less been temporary in a way that they're more pop-ups than permanent structures, because again, we don't own a building, we don't own a street. So that's where government does come in, or property owners with whom we really wish to connect more. Because if we had these pilot projects, of which I think in Brazil, that's how it started as well, where Beatriz was suggesting they're starting a version of something, that an idea, but it's not implemented for good, because then everybody gets scared. Oh no, that could be changing my way of doing things. But they're implementing it for a time T, see how it's working, evaluate it, and then implement it permanently with the input of the people that were all involved. And what I wanted to say to Joy was that, I guess, in this very, very important work that you are doing right now, which I really look forward to see it growing and being a part of, I would just ask you that the sort of town hall meetings and connections to community, which I know the government of Jamaica has a strong policy of making sure community is always heard. But as an architect, I've been in many meetings for development, and many times I come out and I feel that this was another tick box ticked off, like, oh, we need to do community consultation, done. It's not, so I don't want to come across the wrong way, but we do appreciate that, but it needs to feel as if people are really, really heard. It doesn't mean everything everyone says gets done at the end of the day, because that's not possible either, not even in the best democracy. But somehow that community involvement process, which starts with a town hall meeting, with hearing everybody's voices, needs to be a continuous process. So the more people feel they're really heard, and some people are then part of it, the more successful can any new implementation of something be.
Yeah, great point. There's another question in here around understanding the urban renewal policy, the directive to relevant state agencies. So are you kind of saying this is what you guys are going to do? Or is it more of like a kind of guiding principle where we're just kind of suggesting things? I guess how would you define the policy as your department is kind of creating it, LaJoy?
It emphasizes the priorities of the government, the intended strategies, the next steps that the government of Jamaica wants to make in revitalizing urban spaces. So yes, it's a document, but it will be implementable, and we as a branch will aim to implement it, as well as I saw questions about UDC, NHT. We have various collaborators within the government, private sector as well, community groups. So it will be implemented. That is a fact. And we're already starting with programs, and the programs have been ongoing, and we don't plan to stop.
That's good to hear. And I know that we're kind of running up on time, but I do want to just kind of leave on the point that I think lots of the tools and the examples that Beatriz presented, even though in the Fortaleza case, the partner or the leading agency was city government, there are lots of examples across the world of communities, resident associations, or schools kind of doing these projects themselves and taking leadership on doing these things themselves. Whether or not they're legal or, they got the full kind of support, I don't know. I won't talk about that. However, I think in what Beatriz mentioned, the sort of taking the metrics, doing the measurement and evaluation, that can do a lot from moving a project that is maybe unregulated to making it become legal and supported and funded, right? So there's lots of examples of schools wanting to create, say, a school zone, right? You gave a couple of examples of that. Lots of our schools are along major thoroughfares where students are, run, skipping, and jumping over highway barriers. What would it be for a series of schools to make a safe zone around the area? What would it mean for them to take these metrics, these pieces of information documenting the hopefully improved levels of safety the students are facing, and then give it over to a LaJoy or give it over to a KTMAC and say, guys, will you rubber stamp this first? I think oftentimes the answer is yes, right? So I just want to end on that point. I know that there's a bunch more questions here. All of them are for you, LaJoy. But I'm going to I know we're already over time, and I want to pause here and just say thank you so much to Beatriz and our panelists, to Doris and LaJoy. LaJoy is currently sick, and she still showed up, and I appreciate you taking the time and doing that, for participating in this conversation, and for everyone who showed up at the event. This has been the fourth of the kind of ending of our Mobilize series. I really hope it was helpful and interesting to you all, and I hope you found it valuable and inspiring.
Sorry to interject, but for everyone who still has questions, MEGJC, we have a very active Instagram page. So just type in Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Go to the inbox, send your messages there. If you want to mention me or the policy, those messages will certainly get to me. So you can feel free to give me your questions via that media.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I hope that you guys saw what we're trying to do. We wanted to end on a note that change in our built environment, especially here in Jamaica, but more broadly across the Caribbean, that change in our urban environments is possible, and that communities and that invested organizations really can start to experiment and play around with some of these designs. Lots of the tools that Beatriz and our organization shared, I shared the link in the chat. They're publicly available, right? There's an immense amount of examples of how communities are doing this type of work. And I just really hope that, for those of you who have, passion and investment in your spaces and places, that we think about how to start actionizing and doing these things, right? And I'll end again by saying all of our events at Island City Lab are recorded. So this will eventually be posted to our YouTube. Give us a couple weeks. But thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to everyone who participated in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.